On this Commitment Sunday, the Stewardship Committee would like to celebrate the history of our congregation with you via this video. George Freestone and I, Cindy Mattern, along with Don Mattern, who will provide some good old pastime memories, will be taking you down memory lane. We hope you enjoy our Advent history video.
Well, here we are. We're going to be talking a little bit about the history of the people of Advent. And the purpose of this presentation really is twofold. First, it's meant to be the conclusion of 3 stewardship videos associated with the stewardship program this year. Secondly, and perhaps more importantly, it's meant to celebrate our shared history as a group of people, a congregation at a wonderful church in West Lawn, Pennsylvania. Let me talk a little bit about some of the images on this title slide. In the upper right, we have a wonderful graphic icon that was put together by Sue Wagner, and it advertises good news, great joy at our church. And one of the few pictures that we could find that had almost the full congregation at the time is in the top center. That's a picture taken at the beginning of the Rise Up and Build campaign. And I was taking the picture from a ladder in front of them, but there you have the congregation of Advent. Upper left, one member of our congregation, Jim Walker, is in Puerto Rico serving others, an important thing that we do very well at Advent. Another thing that we do well is helping our younger ones learn more about the love of Christ. And you can see that in a Vacation Bible School photo center bottom. We are blessed at Advent. We have several artists, and we're going to introduce 2 or 3 of them through this presentation. The first is Ginny Salzman's lovely view of the red doors for the 1928 building on the lower right. But to get us moving through the presentation, I think Cindy's going to talk a little bit about the theme for Stewardship 2020 and that graphic icon on the lower left.
The theme for Stewardship and Commitment Sunday is who will separate us from the love of Christ. It's from Romans 8, verses 35 and 39. Who will separate us from the love of Christ? Will hardship or distress or persecution or famine or nakedness or peril or sword? As it is written, for your sake we are being killed all day long. We are accounted as sheep to be slaughtered. No, in all these things we are more than conquerors through him who loved us. For I am convinced that neither death nor life, nor angels, nor rulers, nor things present, nor things to come, nor powers, nor height, nor depth, nor anything else in all creation will be able to separate us from the love of God in Christ Jesus our Lord. Kurt Heinley was a dedicated member of the Stewardship Committee and a strong contributor to our church. He was instrumental in establishing and coordinating Family Promise Weeks within our church. Family promises for families currently without homes. After he passed, we realized how much detail and work he went through to make one of these weeks of housing families so successful. We hope that Kurt's example will make an impact and inspire all of us in our congregation to serve our church and our communities.
A very wise person suggested that what we might do with this presentation is create some bookends. And so we've done that. The first bookend is the 1928 building. And I don't know about you, but as I was scanning some of the older photographs associated with our church, I would not have initially been able to tell you that that large image in the center of this screen is from our 1928 building. A couple of things just made it seem different to me. First of all, where'd all that ivy come from? I wasn't aware that we ever had all that ivy. And you never really see that view anymore with the 1960 building right up against it. The other thing that I didn't recognize or think much about is how wide the 1928 building really is. So this was a new view of a wonderful building. Much more typically, I would have thought of the view in the lower right. That's the view from Telford, and you can see the red doors that Ginny Salzman painted in the lower right of that picture. In the upper left, you see a picture of the sanctuary from the 1928 building. You see those three lovely stained glass windows, and it's too bad that we really don't have a color picture of that, but you can see the lovely sanctuary that was created in 1928. This is our first bookend. Please stay tuned for the second. Now, a congregation is all about people. And there's one person on this image that we really want to celebrate. We have Miriam Rhodes depicted in the upper left. And that picture actually was taken from the last worship service conducted in the 1928 building, just prior to renovations taking place for the Rise Up and Build campaign. Now, what's special about Miriam? Well, she was present at the dedication of the 1928 building as a little girl. And there you can see her with her granddaughter and Pastor Rigg in the elevator that was enabled by the Rise Up and Build campaign. Now, more typical shots of the 28 building in the upper right, again, a different one from the Telford side. And in the lower left, you get a little bit of a glimpse of that wide side of the church. But where did all the ivy go? I don't see any of it in that shot. We see a nice Christmassy shot in the lower center. Pastor Weber is depicted to the lower right of Miriam Rhodes, and he was a longtime pastor for Advent. And interestingly, in going through the photo archives, I found a Christmas card that Pastor Weber had used. It's in the dead center of this screen, and if you look carefully, you'll see a standing Pastor Weber in the center.
Katie Smith's father, Arlen Moyer, was the chairman of the call committee that brought Pastor Fryer to Advent in 1970. Significantly, on the first Sunday of his ministry, there was an electrical fire in the 1928 church building. And he indeed did fire up the congregation, didn't he?
Leadership at Advent is shown on this slide in many ways. Following up on Don's comments, I'd like to highlight church council, two different views. A more recent view in the lower left with Bonnie Arner, shown right above it in the pink t-shirt, president of church council from the past. But interestingly, there you see in the upper right, a church council view from 1937. The work of the church is done by committees. And from the early 80s, you'll see a committee shot that I took. You can see me squeezing the bulb there with Gene Haggerty, John Weber, Bob Yike, and our pastor emeritus, Pastor Fryer. He is also highlighted in the top center, as is a very important administrator for our church, Ann Bosler, in the center as well.
I grew up at Advent starting in the 3rd grade, and I was a member for many years until I moved a lot farther away after college. However, now just an hour away, I decided to rejoin our church as it feels like home to me. There's something for everyone at Advent. As you can see in these pictures, there are quilters, we had vacation Bible school, men's breakfast, a women's group, and Bible study for both men and women. This is just to name a few of the ways to grow in our faith at Advent.
Worship is depicted on this slide, a very important part of the life of a congregation. You can see a baptism, center top, communion at the rail, which is something that we used to do in Advent, in the center as well. 3 large images of more recent worship taking place at the church are in the center and off to the right, as well as the bottom. I highlighted the fact that we had a final worship service in the 1928 building before the Rise Up and Build renovations took place. In the center bottom left, you'll see a small image of Bishop Zeiser presiding over that worship service, the last one in the 1928 building. Gary Boone is having fun with some palms on Palm Sunday as an usher. Our pastor emeritus is preaching, but I'll leave this slide by introducing one of our own that grew up, went to seminary, and is now a pastor at St. John's Evangelical Lutheran Church in Lehighton, Lauren Black.
Bob Glick, organist choir director, worked with the MP Moeller Organ Company to design the $100,000 pipe organ, which was built specifically for Advent in around 1975.
The music at Advent. Following up on what my dad said, one of my favorite memories was listening to the trumpeters playing outside as we walked into the 11 p.m. Christmas Eve service. Remember that? I must say that as I'm older, I'm so happy the service is earlier these days. Looking at the picture of the old organ with Grace Heckman seated and Joanna Fryer on the left brings back fond memories to me. I can also remember being a part of the recorder choir, the bell choir, and the choral choir. How about those large choirs pictured on the bottom, both in the old and new sanctuaries? Then we added the 1960 building. Pictured is a program of the dedication of the building to the left. And there are also pictures of the groundbreaking and laying of the cornerstone. Catherine Berger was the artist that drew the picture on the bottom center. And my favorite is the mosaic at the altar. That is one of the main reasons I came back to Advent. I don't know about you, however, it speaks to me, especially when I have communion.
In 1972, the after effects of Hurricane Agnes on the Wilkes-Barre area were devastating. Lutheran Disaster Relief was in the need of financial help to provide aid. It was Sue Wagner's father, Max Leach, who proposed that Advent donate $10,000 to the effort. And the congregation voted to borrow the money and donate $10,000 for Wilkes-Barre flood relief.
We have various ministries of service and outreach under our Director of Ministries, Kathy Raphael. Some of our ministries include Common Ground, Family Promise, Mealtime Ministries, the Social Ministry Committee, the Puerto Rico Mission Trip, Crop Walks, our free library, various food donations, the Hungry Yard Sale, and many more. We also have so many people engaged in serving in various capacities, such as church council, stewardship and finance committees, music and worship, just to name a few, and other volunteer activities such as newsletter coordinating, our ushers, those who provide altar flowers, and so many other services. We hope you will find your niche with Advent this year. Notice a young John Wrights at the top left picture wearing his veteran's uniform. How many of you remember shaking John's hand as you come down the aisle after taking communion? What a fond memory.
Members of the Advent congregation have celebrated many important milestones in their life and in their faith as part of our congregation. Starting shortly after birth with baptisms, you can see the Hawk family celebrating a baptism in the upper right. You can see the Boone family celebrating a baptism in the lower left. We have a wedding, a series of weddings actually, both in the 1960 building and at the 1928 sanctuary as well. That's a lovely picture taken from the balcony of the 1928 building and a wedding in process there. Additionally, you can see the Ebling family, Byard, of course, being one of our past pastors, as they celebrated their donation of the illumination of one of the stained glass windows in the Rose Room. You can also see a fellowship meal following the funeral of John Bryce in the upper left. But one very important and joyous milestone that we celebrated was that of Pastor Fryer being named Pastor Emeritus. And there you can see a certificate where Susan Goodling, Mark Rigg are presenting that certificate to Pastor Fryer, celebrating the 50 years following his ordination as a pastor. This slide celebrates raising money and increasing our ministries at Advent. There are two of the more recent capital campaigns celebrated here, Rise Up and Build and Hope Out Loud, as well as the sponsorship of the illumination of more of those stained glass windows by the Mattern family. First, a little comment on the Rise Up and Build campaign. That was more about improving the bricks and the mortar associated with the 1928 building, mostly. You can see the icon on the celebratory cake in the top center right. We had a wonderful celebration meal outside the kitchen in the top center as well. One very important aspect of the Rise Up and Build campaign was to create a second floor in the 1928 building. If you look in the center right bottom of this image, you can see after the sanctuary in the 1928 building had been gutted, you can see the improvements starting to be made and the second floor being placed, starting to be placed. There was a meeting on a second floor after the renovations depicted right behind that picture of Don Mattern on the second floor. So that wouldn't have been possible without your generous gifts to Rise Up and Build. Two of the leaders of Rise Up and Build were talking at that celebratory meal, Larry Grabowski and myself. And in the upper left, you can see Larry and Joanne Frantz opening the door to the improved office. The second capital campaign that is celebrated here is the Hope Out Loud, which was more about expanding our ministries and communication. One of the key deliverables from that campaign was an improved website, which is evident in the center bottom of this screen. Another was retiring debt, and you can see an image of the cake that is being cut in the lower left, where we actually retired another $175,000 of debt just prior to the pandemic actually striking. So that was, I think, from January of this year. And then a very happy Mattern family in the upper right is celebrating the improvement and beautiful display of the stained glass windows dedicated to Ann Mattern.
Our congregation was fortunate in that we could stay connected during the pandemic through the use of video church services and other get-togethers via Zoom, which included church council, the Stewardship Committee, and the men's breakfast meetings. We also held a Bible study and even a Saturday morning coffee get-together via Zoom. There is a picture of George Freestone in the center as our videographer. We want to thank you, George, for keeping us connected during these turbulent times. We couldn't have done it without you. Thanks so much.
Cindy, I appreciate your kind words. Thank you. And here is what I promised you earlier. This is the closing bookend to our presentation. It celebrates the combined buildings, the 1928 and the 1960 that we've tried to celebrate with you through our presentation. The artists that we celebrated in this presentation include Catherine Berger, Susan Goodling, and then Ginny Salzman. And Ginny is celebrated here again. You can see her image in black and white of the combined buildings. A nice pencil sketch of the combined buildings is in the lower left. But there is, I think, a little bit of a story behind that sign on Penn Avenue there, which, if you read carefully, is celebrating Pastor Fryer's 50-year anniversary. Cindy, I think you have a story there, don't you?
I do, George. Thanks. Advent was able to take out a loan back in the late 1970s to purchase 2 properties along Penn Avenue that connected to the church. The purpose of the loan was to enlarge the footprint of the church, add additional parking, and for the use of the buildings. This purchase also enabled us to add this sign right on Penn Avenue for church news and advertisements. As you know, this is Commitment Sunday. Have you thought about what you can do to help sustain our congregation and our continued level of stewardship? Commitment cards were mailed September 21st and included a postage paid return envelope. We ask that you please return your commitment card to the church office no later than October 15th. Also, please consider an increase to your giving so we can continue to provide the level of stewardship we have in the past. Thank you in advance, and we hope you enjoyed seeing some pictures of Advent's history.
And as they say, Cindy, that's a wrap.